Let's go to John on line one. Hey, John, what are you doing?
Oh, good morning there, gentlemen. Appreciate an opportunity to call in.
Morning.
Different subject. Last week in the Times, there was an article how the city of Hammond and the levee system, primarily from Northcott going to the east, they had removed folks from the flood zone.
Sure.
I was curious if Munster was in the process of working on, from Northcott going to the state line, or how that was going, and if not, why not? And I'll hang up and listen.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks.
Well, the way that works is that those were sections of the river that were completed, and Hammond began to work on that. Gosh, I think from what I heard, it was like a 5-year process to really complete that whole thing. And I think that one of the reasons that it took quite a while was probably because of there's sections of the river that aren't completed yet. So when there's sections of the river that aren't completed, it makes it much more difficult to pull properties out of the flood zone, or at least to change their flood zone rating. The section of the rivers that from Northcott, well, really from the border of Munster all the way to the state line, are not fully completed yet, and they're not signed off on yet. So there can't be any flood relief at this point. But the municipality will, and it is preparing for that inevitability, or that inevitable event to take place. Boy, I really had a hard time with that. So they're waiting for that section to be completed, and then once it is, then the town will pursue the same sort of thing. I mean, this is great what happened. It shows that there can be flood relief. It does also show that the most important thing going forward is going to be the operation and maintenance, because these flood zone determinations can change based on lack of maintenance, lack of funding for maintenance. So it's really still an issue that has to be addressed. It's not something that can just be ignored.
How long?
How long does
before Munster could get out of the floodplain?
It's anybody's guess at this point. I mean, the projects have to be completed. So we anticipate that the projects will be completed by the end of 2012 and basically signed off on, everybody in agreement. At that point, it would just be to see how quickly that determination can be obtained. So it would probably, depending on the speed of the federal government, how FEMA works with it and how everything works.
Couple of years, at best case.
If I had to guess,
yeah.
I mean, I'm just guessing at this point. I'm guessing it'd be a few years.
There's a lot of things that have to come together for that to happen. I mean, in Hammond, it took forever. They were working on that, I
imagine you're going to experience a lot of the same things in the other sections along the levee. I can't see it going that much faster. But that's just, my opinion at this point. Nobody will really know until you delve into it.
Well, obviously one of the biggest event possibly in Munster's history was the flood of 2008. And are we right at that time? What was the date on that? Does anybody remember?
September, was that the 14th?
Yeah,
it's close.
September. It's coming up close.
Yeah.
And the first year I started playing some of the old tape, and it was too disturbing, and I'll probably not do it again. Maybe at the 5-year anniversary we'll play some of that old tape. Mm-hmm. But what are you guys seeing? Are you seeing people getting a little more comfortable now that the Army Corps has come through and has rebuilt a lot of the Little Calumet River walls?
Well, I think the residents themselves might feel a little more comfortable, but until you actually, they release us out of the floodplain, I don't think anybody's going to be, they're still going to be nervous about what's going on right there. I would if I had my house up against there. Until the project itself is completed, and until we actually figure out how we're actually going to maintain it, I would still be a little leery about what's going on.
Is that what you're seeing,
opinion.
Mike?
That's
You live by the river.
Mike.
Yeah, I do. I live over by the river. No, I think there's a certain amount of apprehension that's still out there. I mean, obviously people move on. They become survivors of any type of disaster. I think people in Munster become survivors, and I think there's a certain amount of comfort in seeing that the flood wall, seeing that levee up. So that's been a good amount of construction. There's a significant amount of protection, and people are significantly protected more. There's better protection than there was back then. There's no question about it. But I think, though, there's still concerns in terms of the operation and maintenance. I still talk to people from neighborhoods that were flooded. I still see people at council meetings who are still concerned about the operation and maintenance of that levee going forward, because the main thing is that event that took place, there was a historic amount of rain that came in, but at the same time, there was blockages, along that entire levee, which caused backups, and those backups forced the water over into the Munster community. If there are backups again, you're still going to have issues. You look at how quickly that river fills up. You see how quickly it drains. You see the activity that takes place there. Until you've got a firm system in place to maintain it on a regular basis, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to be 100% comfortable.
219-845-1100. Mike Mellon is in here along with Dr. Andy Koultourides to a little bit more, I guess, mundane topic. The budget season is here.
Budget season is here.
Lake County has come out with some announcements that might even be less than some folks are looking at going forward. How does that affect Munster?
Well, I mean, the tax caps are in a number of different situations, including the frozen levy, are going to make it difficult overall for the municipality to receive the same levels of funding that it's received in the past. The bottom line is any cuts that we anticipate in terms of the levy or the overall operating budget are going to have to be dealt with. So you're going to have to find ways to make cuts, to find relief to primarily the general fund. The general fund is really the fund that receives the largest burden. So you need to, on a regular basis, look at what your expenses are in your general fund, and do they properly belong in that fund? Should they be shifted potentially to other funds through a legitimate reason? If the salaries and the allocation of expenses, are they appropriate still today? So there's potential that you can see relief in the general fund by the shifting of expenses based on kind of really the new appropriate area that they reside. If that makes any sense. Obviously you can have the reverse of that. You can have where something really is an appropriate expense for the general fund, which was in a different fund for years and years and years, and so that's going to create even more of a burden for you. So there's so much to it, and there's so many mechanical issues that we have to kind of meander through during this process, that it's going to take a little bit of time to really kind of see what the effects are going to be. And we know the budgets will be, or the amount of the appropriations will be lower. So
one of the talk at the county level, of course, is the funding of, I guess would be the in many people's mind is the most important services, which is the police and fire. How is that funding going on at the town level in Munster?
Well, you have to remember that the general fund is your police and fire. I mean, that's 90% of the general fund is police and fire expenses, and it's 90% of that expense is salary expenses. So when I talk about that there's a burden on the general fund, I'm saying that you've got a burden on police and fire. Fund accounting, and this is, you get into this, is people don't really understand, the restrictions that are placed in the municipality. You can't just say, well, I got a bunch of money in the parks department, so let's, pay for officers with that. Let's pay for the on-call fire department with that. You can't. I mean, first of all, the parks funds are the parks funds, and secondly, especially if they're capital funds, they can't be utilized for just general operations. So you've got those restrictions in place. So we talk about this pressure that takes place in the general fund all the time. I mean, really translated, I'm saying that there's a burden on police and fire. That's where your cuts are going to be coming in. That's where some of the issues are going to come in. And people can say, well, why don't you eliminate your 50-50 sidewalk program? Stop doing that. Well, that doesn't actually create a benefit to the general fund. That doesn't actually put money back in the general fund. So yeah, I can cut that, but it doesn't help me in this situation. I have to try to reappropriate those dollars, and oftentimes those dollars are restricted. So it's not like financial accounting. It's not one income statement for the municipality. It's not one cash flow statement and one balance sheet, and then more importantly, one cash flow statement. It's a myriad of little cash flow statements with restrictions on the cash flows as to what they can be spent on, whether it be capital or operation.
You, Dr. Koultourides, do you get the feeling that this is the part that Mellon really likes?
Well, no, this was actually, I was kind of chuckling inside here, because when I first got on, I kept saying, well, let's just use this money over here, and they constantly kept explaining to me, no, you can't use it for this. You can only use it for this. And I'm like, makes no sense to me in my mind, but yeah, I'm finally understanding it, that we're limited on what we can actually use certain money for, and like I said, it's the bulk of it goes to police and fire.
Now, is with this season coming on now, I mean, is Munster looking at, I just was reading it over the weekend, that the county is saying that some of these municipalities are going to get significantly less than they think that's coming. Do you guys have any projections for you guys that are important?
Well, we have projections in terms of where we think we're going to come out of this whole thing based on the tax caps, and you know, there's going to be significant cuts, and that's like I say, the burden is going to be on the general fund. You're looking at, you know, potentially millions of dollars in reductions in revenues to the general fund, but at the same time, you've got to. It's premature at this point because we haven't gone through the budget process to really say what the effect is at the end of the year. Because, like I said, you've got to go through the proper analysis, look at all departments, look at all areas, figure out what, you know, dollars can be reappropriated to different funds, what you can get into the general fund, and then what relief and what burdens you can take off of the general fund. So to say, you know, at the end of the year, well, you know, we're going to have to lay off, you know, 18 people, we don't know that at this point. So let's, you know, go through it, and let's find a way so we don't have to do that. That's always been my thing, and you know, Jim, I'll tell you, we've been dealing with this problem for, you know, quite a while now. This is not a new phenomena that's coming on.
Are people getting to the point where, you know, they've cut it? I mean, Munster isn't the only. Every agency, every town, every city, every little thing, every municipality has been cut. It seems like everybody's been cutting every year. Is there anything left to cut?
Here's the thing, you know, the ones that have been really clobbered by this frozen levy are the efficient communities. The most efficient community, and we'll call it Community A. I'm not going to say if, you know, who it is or anything along those lines. I don't even know who it is. That's not my business. But what I'm saying is the most efficient community in Lake County, Community A, the day the frozen levy took in place, they were penalized the most. The least efficient community, we'll call them Community B, they were fine. Because it's really easy to say, wow, man, we've got to cut back, you know, X amount of $1 million. All right, let's lay off 50% of our ghost payroll. I mean, that doesn't really affect your operations in any way, shape, or form. You can continue on. Yeah, it maybe affects the ghost payroller, but we're not as concerned about that individual as we should be.